The wind scratched across Broken Horn Valley like a dull blade, dragging dust in lazy swirls across the fields. The sun was a bleached eye in the sky, glaring down at cracked earth and stubborn weeds that refused to die. Out here, silence wasn't just a backdrop, it was a presence, thick and full of judgment. And in that silence stood a man, motionless against the horizon, a shovel in one hand and an old straw hat sagging low over his brow. Silas Boone didn't say much to people. Didn't need to. Folks in the nearest town, 20 miles south and still too close for comfort, called him the Ghost Farmer, the Yankee Drifter, or just Boone. None of them knew much about him, just that he'd shown up 5 years back with a mule, a Winchester, and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much smoke and not enough sleep. He bought a stretch of land no one wanted and built a life with his own 2 hands and nobody else's permission. His days were predictable. He woke with the dawn, drank strong black coffee boiled over a fire, and walked the fence lines with a rifle slung across his back, boots grinding into the parched soil. He planted what the land would let him, mostly corn, some squash, and tended to the worn barn and the stubborn horse that hated everyone except him. Whiskey Jack, the horse, had once kicked a passing trader so hard the man spun twice before hitting the ground. Silas didn't apologize for the animal. He didn't apologize for much of anything. But every man, no matter how scarred, carries ghosts. And Silas carried his in silence, folded into the lines of his weathered face and the ritual of his days. At night, he'd sit by the fire, whittling, his blue eyes fixed on the flame like it held the past in its heart. Sometimes he muttered things under his breath. Names. A child's laughter. A woman's scream. Then he'd drink. Not to forget, it was too late for that, but to keep from remembering too clearly. The only sign of any connection to the world beyond his valley was a shoebox full of letters he kept in a cedar drawer, tied with twine. They were addressed to a woman named Miriam Boone, never mailed, written in a looping hand that belonged to a different version of himself. I saw a hawk today, one letter read. Reminded me of the one we saw near the river, the day you told me we'd be parents. Another, corn failed again. Can't seem to make this place grow anything but dust and bones. He never read them aloud. Never needed to. He remembered every word. That morning the shovel clinked against rock and Silas sighed. Another dead patch. He wiped his forehead with a filthy rag and looked out over the ridge. Something moved up there, a flicker, a shadow against the sky. He squinted but saw nothing now. Could have been a deer. Could have been a memory. Whiskey Jack whinnied, uneasy. All right, Silas muttered. Let's have a look. He walked up the hill, rifle in hand, boots crunching over dry grass and loose shale. At the top he scanned the valley. Nothing. Just the quiet breath of wind and the occasional caw of a vulture circling overhead. But there, near the edge of his property, something caught his eye. Tracks fresh ones. Small feet bare. Child size. Oddly light, barely pressing into the dirt. He crouched down, tracing the prints with his fingers. Not white. Not from town. He hadn't seen a child in years and certainly not one traveling alone out here. The tracks meandered toward the river, swift and cold, fed by the high snows that hadn't yet given up the ghost. He stood slowly, frowning. This land didn't forgive mistakes. A child out here wouldn't last a day. The sun had begun to slide down the sky, throwing long shadows over the hills. Silas headed back to the cabin. He wanted to convince himself that the tracks weren't his problem, that whatever kid had wandered through had already passed, moving on toward whatever was waiting. But something gnawed at him. Inside the cabin, the light was dim and gold. He pulled a tin plate of beans from the fire and ate standing up. Outside, the wind rose again. Something felt wrong. Then came the sound. A scream, not loud but high and sharp. Like a bird in pain. Like a child, far off and terrified. Silas dropped the plate. It shattered on the floor. He grabbed the rope hanging on the wall, looped it across his chest and whistled. Whiskey Jack was at the door in seconds. They rode fast, Silas guiding the horse through scrub and stone, eyes scanning for movement. The scream came again, shorter this time. Then the rush of river water. He dismounted and ran the last few yards to the riverbank, boots slipping on slick moss. The water here was deep and narrow, fast as a bullet. And in the middle of it, barely above the surface, was a tiny head, dark hair plastered to a round face, 2 arms thrashing in panic. Silas didn't think. He dropped the rope, stripped off his coat, and dove. The cold hit like a punch to the chest. The current pulled at him, greedy and wild. He kicked hard, teeth gritted, muscles burning. The boy went under. Silas surged forward, arm outstretched, reaching. Fingers brushed skin. He grabbed, pulled, kicked backward. The river screamed around them, frothing against stone. He broke the surface, coughing, dragging the child up with one arm, swimming with the other. It felt like 100 years before he reached the shore, lungs aching, legs numb. He hauled them both onto a flat rock and collapsed, the boy beside him unmoving. "Come on," he gasped. "Breathe, damn you." He turned the child over and pushed on his back. Water spilled from the boy's mouth. He coughed, sputtered, then whimpered. Silas let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. The boy was Lakota, maybe 8, no more. His chest rose and fell in shallow gasps, and his fingers clutched at the dirt. Around his neck hung a carved talisman, a bear worn smooth with age. Silas touched it gently. Sacred, probably. The kind of thing you don't take unless you're willing to start a war. He carried the boy back in his arms, dripping and shaking, heart pounding in his throat. Whiskey Jack followed silently. Back at the cabin, Silas stoked the fire high and wrapped the boy in the thickest wool blanket he had. He heated broth, fed it to him spoonful by spoonful, and watched him slowly come back to life. The boy didn't speak. Just watched him with wide black eyes, full of wariness and something else, something ancient and knowing. Silas sat back finally, chest still tight. "You're a long way from home," he muttered. The boy said nothing. Just held the bear charm and stared at the flames. Night fell heavy. Coyotes howled in the distance. Silas sat by the fire with a rifle across his lap, eyes half closed, one ear open. The boy slept curled near the hearth, breathing slow and shallow. Just before sleep took him, Silas whispered, "You're safe now, boy. Whoever you are." And then he heard it, softer than wind, yet certain, the faint thunder of hooves on distant earth. He opened his eyes. Far out across the valley, black shapes began to gather at the edge of the hills. Dozens, then more. Warriors on horseback, silent as smoke, watching from the shadows. The fire popped. The boy stirred but did not wake. Silas did not move. He just stared out the window, a chill crawling up his spine. Morning wasn't here yet. But it was coming. And it wouldn't come alone. The boy was still asleep when the first rays of light sliced through the dusty cabin window. Silas stood near the door, eyes fixed on the hills, where the dark silhouettes of horses and riders had gathered in the night like a slow-moving storm. They hadn't approached yet, hadn't spoken or fired a shot. Just stood. Waiting. He turned back to the small figure wrapped in blankets by the hearth. The boy's breathing was even, but his face bore the bruises of fear, tight jaw, clenched fists, skin pale under the fire's glow. Silas crouched beside him and brushed back a strand of wet hair. The carved bear still hung from the boy's neck, slick with river water but unbroken. There was no time to guess intentions. No time to wonder if the riders were kin or enemies. Silas stood, poured coffee into a tin cup, and drank it scalding, hoping it would burn away the chill in his gut. He strapped on the worn leather gun belt, checked the chamber of his Colt, then loaded his Winchester with hands that were too steady for a man expecting death. The boy stirred. Eyes fluttered open, dark eyes, watchful, immediately alert. He tensed when he saw Silas. "You're safe here," Silas said softly. No response. "You remember the river?" he asked. The boy nodded once, barely. "You nearly drowned." Silas waited, but the boy only stared. He was assessing, calculating like a trapped animal that wasn't sure if the trap had truly opened. "You got a name?" A beat of silence. Then, quiet as wind through pine needles, "Toka." Silas exhaled slowly, like letting go of something heavy. "All right, Toka. I'm Boone." The boy looked away, eyes drifting to the bear charm. He clutched it. Silas watched him a moment longer. No bruises, no visible wounds beyond some river cuts and a swollen ankle. But trauma ran deeper than skin. "You hungry?" Toka hesitated, then nodded. Silas handed him a chipped bowl with warm stew, rabbit, potato, and wild onion. The boy ate with small, careful bites. Each movement was practiced, cautious. Like he'd learned to survive by not drawing attention. "You run off?" Silas asked. "Or did someone push you in?" Toka's spoon paused. He didn't answer, but his mouth tightened. Silas took that as enough. A slow beat of hooves echoed from the hills. Closer this time. Deliberate. He stood, walked to the front window, and drew the curtain aside. They were coming now. Dozens of riders, men painted in ochre and black, adorned with feathers and rawhide. Some wore war bonnets, others simple braids. Spears and rifles gleamed under the morning sun. At the front rode a tall man with a fur-lined cloak and a face that might have been carved from granite. His horse, a mottled gray beast, moved like it had never known fear. Silas swallowed once. "They're here for you, aren't they?" he asked. Toka's spoon slipped into the bowl. His eyes met Silas's. This time there was no doubt. Fear. But something more. Shame. You in trouble, boy? Toka's gaze dropped. Outside, the warriors halted in a perfect arc around the cabin. Not a word spoken. Not a gun raised. Just stillness, ominous and absolute. A single figure broke rank. A woman wrapped in deerskin with a rifle slung across her back and two thick braids falling over her shoulders. Her boots kicked up little clouds of dust as she walked toward the porch. Silas opened the door before she reached it. His rifle hung across his shoulder, but his hand stayed open. She didn't smile. You are Boone? She asked. Her accent was light, but her English was crisp, practiced. I am. She nodded once. The boy. We have come for him. Silas glanced back. Toka had not moved. He's alive because I pulled him out of a river. He should not have been near the river. Well, Silas said, voice firm, he was. And he nearly died. She studied him a moment. Eyes sharp as flint. You know who he is? She asked. Silas shook his head. She took a breath as if weighing how much to reveal. He is the grandson of Iron Elk. The boy is next in line to lead the Red Willow people. Silas looked at Toka. The boy hadn't flinched at the name, but his jaw had set. I see, Silas said. And he wandered off into a river all on his own? The woman didn't answer. Silas stepped aside. You can come in. But just you. She hesitated, then nodded, stepping over the threshold. Her gaze flicked around the cabin, landing on Toka. Tokala, she said gently, using the full form of his name. He didn't answer. We have come to take you home. Still no answer. Silas watched the tension between them, invisible but undeniable. You speak for Iron Elk? He asked. I am Elena, she said. I speak his words when he wishes it. He doesn't wish it now? He wishes to see who saved his blood. Silas poured a second cup of coffee. Tell him to come to the porch then. I won't hide behind walls. Elena stepped outside and waved once. The tall warrior spurred his horse forward, stopping just short of the steps. I am Iron Elk, he said, his voice low and deep, like river stones under pressure. You pulled my grandson from the river. You may name a favor. Silas didn't move. I don't need a favor. Then name your price. I don't want a price either. Iron Elk narrowed his eyes. Then what do you want? I want to know why a child meant to lead your people was left to drown in a river. A flicker of something passed through the chief's expression. Pain, shame, regret. It was gone in an instant. There are those who would see him gone, Iron Elk said. Not all wish to follow a boy. Not all believe in bloodlines. So someone tried to kill him. Yes. Someone close. Iron Elk said nothing. Behind Silas, Toka spoke for the first time since Elena arrived. It was my cousin. He pushed me. Said the river would choose between us. Iron Elk turned slowly. His jaw tightened. Elena knelt before Toka. We searched all night, she said. We thought you'd taken. Or worse. Toka stared at her. You didn't stop him. I did not know. Silas stepped forward. What happens now? Iron Elk answered. The boy returns to us, and the traitor will be dealt with. Silas looked at Toka. The boy's eyes were glassy, uncertain. I don't think he trusts that, Silas said. He is blood, Iron Elk said, almost impatient. Blood doesn't mean safety, Silas replied. Ask any orphan. Elena stood. You've done a great thing, Boone. But this is not your fight. Maybe not. But it's his. Silas knelt beside Toka. You want to go back with them? Toka didn't speak. You scared? Silas asked. The boy nodded just once. Silas stood slowly and turned to Iron Elk. He stays one more night. Then I bring him to you myself. That's the only way I hand him over. Iron Elk's men bristled, but the chief raised a hand. One night. They turned and rode away, vanishing like smoke over the ridge. Elena lingered. Why do this? Silas shrugged. I got pulled out of a fire once. Would have died. The man who saved me stuck around just long enough to make sure I could stand. You think he needs to stand? Silas looked down at Toka. I think he's close. She nodded and left without another word. As the dust settled, Silas turned back to the boy. We've got till sunrise. Toka looked up. Will you teach me to shoot? Silas raised a brow. Why? In case he tries again. Silas hesitated, then walked to the gun rack and pulled down a small carbine. All right, he said. But first we eat. And somewhere deep in the silence between them, trust began to form, not loud or fast but strong like roots under stone. Dawn broke with the kind of quiet that usually came before a storm. Pale gold stretched across Broken Horn Valley, brushing the ridges in soft light, but nothing about the moment felt gentle. Silas stood on the porch with a rifle across his back and a cup of coffee cooling in his hand. He hadn't slept. The boy had, though, deep, dreamless sleep, wrapped in a wool blanket on the floor near the hearth. That, Silas considered a victory. The wind was still, the kind that made a man feel like the world had paused just long enough for something irreversible to happen. From behind him came the soft creak of the cabin floorboards. Toka appeared in the doorway, his eyes half-lidded with sleep, but his grip on the little carbine Silas had let him hold the night before was firm. The weapon was too big for him, but the boy held it like it meant something. Silas didn't turn. "Don't point that unless you mean to use it." "I won't," Toka said. He stepped beside Silas, looking out over the fields. "You ever shot before?" Silas asked. "No. We'll fix that." They walked together toward the edge of the property, where a row of rusted cans sat atop fence posts. Silas set up 3 more. "Focus on breathing. Line up the sight. Don't pull, squeeze." Toka nodded, lips tight. He took a stance, mimicking what Silas had shown him. The first shot cracked and missed wide. The second was better. By the 5th he nicked a can. It clattered to the ground. Toka allowed himself a flicker of satisfaction. "Good," Silas said. "Better than I was my first time." They practiced until the sun climbed above the hills, and Toka's arms began to tremble from the effort of holding the weapon steady. Silas took the carbine from him gently. "You don't need to prove anything right now." "I do," Toka said, not looking up. "If I can't protect myself, they'll never stop." Silas paused. "You mean your cousin?" Toka nodded once, almost ashamed. "He said I was weak. That I was only chosen because I was born from the chief's daughter. He said leadership should be earned." Silas crouched beside him. "And what do you believe?" "I don't know." The boy looked at the horizon. "I thought I did. Now I'm not sure." "Doubt ain't weakness," Silas said. "It's the thing that makes men slow down before they ruin everything." Toka didn't reply, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. Silas took it for what it was, a crack in the wall. They returned to the cabin. Elena was already there, leaning against the porch post with arms crossed, eyes following every movement with silent scrutiny. She didn't say anything as they approached. "I didn't hear you ride in," Silas said. "I didn't ride. I walked." She looked at Toka. "Iron Elk is waiting. If he does not see the boy before midday, he will ride in himself." Silas motioned to the door. "Let him wait. We're not late yet." Elena didn't argue, but something in her posture shifted. Tension under the skin. She followed them inside. Silas placed the carbine on the table and poured water from a tin jug. "He tell you what he plans to do about the cousin?" She didn't answer immediately. "Justice will be served." "That's vague." "It is the only answer I was given." Silas handed the cup to Toka, who drank without complaint. The silence between the 3 of them settled heavy in the room, until Elena finally broke it. "You care for him more than you admit." Silas glanced at her. "That's so. You're a man who spent years convincing himself the world can't touch him. And yet, here you are, standing in front of a war party for a child you met 2 days ago." "He nearly died in my arms," Silas said. "That changes things." "It does," she agreed. "But it also puts you in danger. You know that, don't you?" "I've been in danger most of my life. Don't see the sense in flinching now." Elena's expression softened just a little. "You remind me of my father." "Dead?" "Alive. But haunted." Toka looked between them, then stood. "I'm ready." "You sure?" Silas asked. The boy nodded. "They won't respect me if I don't face them." Silas studied him a long moment, then grabbed his coat and rifle. "All right. Let's go." Outside, the valley felt bigger somehow, as if the moment had inflated the land itself. The trio rode out, Silas on Whiskey Jack, Toka on a borrowed pony, and Elena on foot beside them. They didn't speak much. The crunch of hooves and boots over dry earth said enough. They reached the Red Willow camp near midday. Dozens of teepees stood in a wide circle, smoke curling from their tops, the smell of burning cedar and meat thick in the air. Warriors stood at the edges, watching silently. Children peeked from behind skirts and shoulders. Toka sat straighter in his saddle, jaw tight. Iron Elk waited by the central fire, flanked by elders and warriors. His face gave away nothing. Silas saw the cousin immediately, a boy of maybe 14, tall for his age, with a mouth twisted in barely concealed contempt. He stood beside a hunched old woman, eyes locked on Toka. They dismounted. Elena walked forward and whispered to the chief. Iron Elk listened, then stepped toward Toka. You return, he said. That is good. Toka nodded. You bring those who helped you. I do. Iron Elk looked at Silas. You have kept him alive. For that I owe you. No debt, Silas said. I didn't do it for you. The chief gave a short nod. Still it is done. He turned to the camp. Let all bear witness. People gathered. A hush fell over the clearing. This boy, Iron Elk said, voice raised, is of my blood. He was chosen not by birth alone but by spirit. The river did not take him. The fire did not burn him. His path was not ended. This was tested. Murmurs passed through the crowd. Iron Elk motioned, and the cousin was brought forward. 2 warriors gripped his arms. The boy struggled, but not much. You pushed your kin into the river, Iron Elk said. The cousin spat. He is soft. You admit it then? I would do it again. Iron Elk's jaw hardened. Then you have no place among us. The warriors dragged the boy back. He screamed curses, kicked, and finally disappeared behind the wall of men. The elders began to chant, low, rhythmic, rising and falling like waves. Toka stood frozen, breathing fast. Silas leaned down. You did good. I didn't want this, Toka whispered. No leader wants what makes him a leader, Silas replied. They just carry it. Iron Elk stepped closer. You are not a child now. You are a voice. One the tribe must listen to, whether they agree or not. Toka looked up at him, then nodded. Just once. The chief turned to Silas. You may stay if you wish. Silas looked at the circle of people, at the fire, at Toka. I don't belong here, he said. But thank you. You belong more than you think. Elena approached. You will leave now? I will. Toka looked at him. Will I see you again? Silas hesitated. You might. The world's smaller than it looks. He turned, walked back to Whiskey Jack, and swung into the saddle. The sun had begun its slow descent. The wind returned, soft and constant, brushing against his coat as he rode. He didn't look back. But behind him, a boy watched until he vanished into the dust. The wind shifted westward, warm and dry, rolling down from the hills like a whispered warning. Silas Boone rode low in the saddle, his coat flapping behind him like a weathered flag. 3 days had passed since he left the Red Willow camp, and with each mile he told himself he was returning to solitude, to the quiet life he'd carved into the bones of the valley. But the silence no longer fit him the way it used to. Something had changed. He dismounted by the creek and knelt to refill his canteen. The water ran clear over polished stones, but the moment he dipped his hand, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Instinct, old and buried deep, screamed in his spine. He turned slowly. There were 5 of them, riders in dark dusters, their horses restless. The leader wore a red bandana and a bone-handled pistol low on his hip. His face was tan leather, eyes like wet coal. The others looked mean and thin, men used to getting what they wanted from the end of a barrel. Name's Cutter, the leader said. Heard you been interfering with Red Willow business. Silas stood slowly, water dripping from his fingers. I pulled a child out of a river. That child was meant to stay under it, Cutter said. Silas said nothing. You don't understand the balance of things out here, the outlaw continued. Tribes got their leaders. Some of those leaders don't want boys born of peace-loving mothers and dead warriors. They want men who'll spill blood when the time comes. So you're working for the cousin. Cutter smiled. Let's say I'm working for someone with long memories and short patience. Silas took a step closer. He was exiled. I watched it myself. Cutter shrugged. Exile's just another word for not yet finished. His uncle rides with us now. Some others too. They mean to take the Red Willow camp by nightfall. And you're gonna help us find the path back in. Silas looked up at the sky. You're a damn fool if you think I'd help slaughter innocents. We're not asking, one of the others said, raising a rifle. Cutter nodded to another man who pulled a burlap sack from his saddlebag and tossed it at Silas's feet. It landed with a dull thud. Silas stared at it for a moment, then crouched. He untied the knot. Inside were 2 carved totems, one a bear, the other an eagle, both Red Willow clan markers. Blood stained their edges. Messenger we sent didn't make it, Cutter said. But he carried your name. Silas stood slowly. His jaw clenched tight. Cutter spat in the dirt. Last chance, Boone. You help us ride in quiet, no one gets hurt. You just said you're gonna kill their leader. Not everyone counts as someone. Silas stepped back, hands low. I gave my word to the boy. Cutter's voice turned sharp. Then it'll be your grave next to his. They reached for their guns, but Silas moved first. The first shot took the man with the rifle, center chest, clean through. The second dropped the one with the burlap sack. Cutter fired wide, grazed Silas's shoulder, but Boone was already behind the creek boulder, rolling, reloading. He ducked left, drew his revolver, and took 2 quick shots. One hit a horse, sending it rearing and screaming. Another man fell, crushed beneath it. Cutter cursed and scrambled for cover. The last man tried to flank, but Silas caught him with a rifle round to the thigh, then another to the head. Silence returned fast, brutal as the shootout itself. Only Cutter remained, limping behind a tree, reloading with trembling fingers. You think you're a hero, Boone? He called out. Silas didn't answer. You're a ghost playing farmer. You don't belong anywhere. That last part, those words, cut deeper than the bullet. Silas moved slowly, quietly, circling. When he emerged on Cutter's flank, he didn't hesitate. The shot echoed like thunder, clean and final. Cutter's body crumpled beside the tree. Silas exhaled once, slow. Then he turned and mounted Whiskey Jack. There was no time to waste. He rode hard, cutting across dry gulches and shallow ravines, pushing the horse like he hadn't in years. He didn't stop for water. Didn't stop to rest. The sun slid behind the hills, setting the sky ablaze, but he kept riding. By the time he crested the ridge overlooking the Red Willow camp, night had fallen, and the camp was already under siege. Flames licked at the edges of tents. War cries split the dark. Gunfire crackled. Silas could see shapes darting between shadows. Red Willow warriors, outnumbered, surrounded. The raiders had come in silence, just as promised. And at the heart of it all was a figure on horseback, cloaked in red, Toka's cousin. Older now. Hardened by hate. Silas drew his rifle and descended into the fire. He rode straight through the chaos, firing as he went, each shot deliberate. He saw Elena near the western perimeter, holding a bloodied blade, covering the retreat of children. Silas yelled her name. She turned, saw him, and pointed east. Toka's at the fire pit, she shouted. He's trapped. Silas nodded once and rode on. The center of camp was a nightmare. Flames casting mad shadows, warriors fighting hand to hand. Toka stood atop a low stone altar, the bear charm glowing in the firelight. 2 older warriors defended him fiercely, but they were being pushed back. Then the cousin appeared, striding through smoke with 2 men at his back. He raised a pistol, pointing it at the boy. Silas dismounted at full gallop, letting the momentum carry him forward. He hit the ground running, tackled one of the cousin's men, rolled, came up shooting. The second man fell. Toka's defenders turned, emboldened, and pressed forward. The cousin turned the pistol toward Silas. They stared at each other across 20 paces of flame and dust. Still saving him? The cousin shouted. Silas didn't answer. His eyes said everything. The cousin fired first. Silas shifted, felt the heat of the bullet tear past his ribs. He returned fire, once straight through the heart. The cousin staggered, stared down at the wound, then dropped to his knees. He looked at Toka as if in apology, then fell backward, dead. Silas dropped to one knee, gasping. Blood spilled warm beneath his shirt. Toka ran to him, kneeling. You're shot. I noticed. Elena arrived seconds later, blood on her blade and tears in her eyes. You fool, she said. You should have let us handle it. Silas gave a pained chuckle. You needed a ghost, not a soldier. Warriors encircled them, forming a wall around the fire pit. The raiders were broken, scattered. The camp would survive. Iron Elk approached slowly, leaning on a spear. He looked down at Silas, then at Toka. You chose, he said. Toka looked up. He saved us again. Iron Elk nodded. Then he will not die here. Silas smiled faintly. No promises. They carried him to the medicine tent. Elena worked with trembling hands, muttering prayers in Lakota. Toka sat nearby, clutching the bear charm. Hours passed. Pain came in waves. But Silas did not slip under. He clung to the world by the strength of every life he'd failed to save, and the one he hadn't. By morning the fire had died down. Smoke lingered, but the sky was clear. Silas awoke to find Toka sleeping by his side. Outside, the tribe began to sing, not a song of mourning but one of survival. He turned his head toward the rising sun. A boy had become a leader. And a loner, once adrift in grief, had become something more. He had found his place, not in the cabin or the valley or the silence, but in the act of saving what still could be saved. And in that moment Silas Boone smiled. For the first time in years the ghosts were quiet.